Today I am going to share with you 6 of my one-of-a-kind rustic spring wreaths that I have made throughout my YouTube career. I hope you love them as much as I do. Hi there, welcome to my channel. My name is Sandra and you're watching The Schwowin's Nest.
In keeping with the buffalo check theme that I have for my video today, I am going to create a buffalo check ribbon rag wreath. I really love the look of those. They're so nice and fluffy. So I'm going to be cutting 7 inches of the buffalo check ribbon, and then I'm going to tie it just once onto the wire wreath form, and then I'll just fluff it up. The wreath form, I believe, is from Dollar Tree. It's one of the 18-inch ones, but I did cut off the outer 2 rings. So these are just the inner 2 rings because I didn't want a huge wreath and I wanted to save that for something different. So again, just a 7-inch piece of the ribbon, and this is wired ribbon too, tying it once and then just pushing it up against the rest of them. It's already looking so fun. Look at how fluffy it is, and it's got some little strings and pieces hanging from it, but I just think it's so quirky and fun. I have these beautiful purple pansies that were a thrift store find many years ago. They've just been sitting around in my stash since I haven't used them on display anymore. So I'm going to cut them apart and then wire them onto the wreath frame. I'm also going to use a little bit of hot glue just to tack the pansies in place so they don't flop around. I'm going to just put a few different rows on. So I'm starting with these taller ones here, and then I'm going to just fill in the rest of the wreath form with a bunch of other pansies. When I got towards the bottom, I had some shorter stems, so I just bent them up a little bit, hooked them onto the wire frame, and used hot glue to hold them in place. And this turned out really good. Look at how beautiful and full that is. I just love it. The pansies also had some of these little buds, so I'm going to just use some hot glue and place them all in through the pansies themselves. And then I'm going to add a little bit of some greenery that is almost the color of lamb's ear, but it's actually just greenery that I spray painted a little bit with some white paint. Just give it a little bit of a dusting. And I think this wreath turned out really beautiful. I've got it hanging on my front door. It's really lightweight, but it stays on there perfectly, and I'm so happy with this wreath. I grabbed this tobacco basket after Christmas at Marshall's. It had a red berry wreath inside of it, and both items together were only $10. So if you take away the berry wreath, the basket was really only $5. I started using my chalk paint brush and Annie Sloan chalk paint. I didn't like how that was working out, so I went back to my regular old cheapy bristle brush, and I'm going to give it some Rust-Oleum linen white and make sure that some of the wood is showing through, but I want this to look fairly white. I wanted to use some kind of wreath form to help me create the wreath, so I found this willow wreath in my stash, and this was a Dollar Tree find, so up here in Canada, $1.25, but I didn't want to use the natural color, so again I'm just using my chalk paint and I'm giving it a rough coat of white. So on my table here you can see that I've got a whole bunch of lavender. These branches came from the Dollar Tree and also Dollarama. They were all $1.25 a piece. I believe I used about 6 of the ones I have in my hand right now, and I had 3 of the different colors, and I'm trying to use some different shades of the lavender just to make the wreath more dimensional. I'm using the wire part of the stem to stick into the willow wreath, and then I'm using some hot glue just to make sure it doesn't fall out. If you've seen me create wreaths before, I usually pull apart the stem from the blossom. In this situation, I needed that little bit of stem to poke into the wreath. I didn't have enough of that wire on each of these stems, so I had to use some of the extra ones that I keep especially the thin ones. I always try to keep that wire stem because it's going to come in handy down the road. When you're making a wreath and you want it really nice and full, it's always a good idea to put some on the outside and some florals on the inside, as well as some florals in the middle on top, and also use different lengths. So for these pieces, I'm using the same length, but shortly you're going to see me use some longer pieces that are just going to give the wreath a little bit more dimension. So I've finished the wreath part, but what I want to do now is add a little bit of greenery. So I'm taking some little stems of lamb's ear that I picked up at Joann's, and I'm just poking them into the back of the frame. I'm using about 6 or 7 pieces just to go around and give it a little bit more color. I just love the way the lamb's ear looks with the lavender. To attach the wreath to the basket, I'm using a cable tie or a zip tie, whatever you want to call it. And I'm just going to feed it through the hole in the basket. And also I'm going to push it through one of the branches of the wreath, and then I'll tie it off, and then it will just hang there. I didn't want to hot glue it because you never know, with me down the road, I might decide to change out this wreath, maybe use it for fall or do something different with the basket.
For this wreath, I am going to be starting off with a Dollar Tree wreath form. I have cut off the 2 outer rings. I don't want to use those because that's not necessary, so I'll be able to use that on a different project. I'm taking my snips and just trimming off that little excess piece. I'm going to take the blossoms off the stems and use them individually. To attach the flowers to the wreath form, I'm going to be using hot glue and probably a really good amount of hot glue, but I'm going to put them underneath like this and then grab a couple of the little sprigs, pull them up and over the wreath form, and that's going to just help me keep that in place. Then I'll be able to glue where the little sprigs are on top of the wreath form and hold everything together. I had to use a pretty good amount of hot glue for each of these little stems, and I had to just hold it in place until the glue had a chance to set up. Here's how it's looking so far. It's really nice and fluffy and full, and I think it's so pretty. So I'm just going to continue adding all of the blossoms until I have it completely full. I did this wreath a long time ago, but I believe I got the blossoms at Michael's when they were buy one, get one free. Once everything was all set up, I took my snips again and just trimmed off the little nibs that you can see there, just so the wreath would hang flatter on the wall. After I had it hanging for a while, I decided to add some boxwood greenery around the outside edges, just to give it more of a pop of color. And I really love how this one turned out.
I've been wanting to make a wagon wheel wreath for a really long time, and I know that Dollar Tree carries a wire form, but I wanted mine to be wood. So I'm using a 12-inch embroidery hoop, and I'm going to use both of the hoops for this one, and some of these 6-inch dowels from the Dollar Tree. Now I'm going to have to cut these down as well, and I thought I would give these dog nail trimmers a try. I've seen a few people say that these cut dowels, and because they're a rounded edge, it's really easy to do so. I didn't find it so easy. Maybe I'm doing it wrong, but I think these dowels are just a little too thick for that. So I did switch over to my side cutters to finish the job. I'm using just a tiny little dot of hot glue on the end of the dowel to attach it to the embroidery hoop. I don't want a whole lot of glue seeping out because I want to be staining this later, and the glue will of course not take the stain. Once I have them all together, I'm going to take this 4-inch wood round that I did pick up at the Dollar Tree in a pack of 3, I believe. And I'm going to just measure to make sure that I have it in the right spot. And then I'm going to use hot glue to glue all of this down really well. Once that glue has dried, I can flip it over and add this other smaller piece of wood round, also came from the Dollar Tree, and then I'm set to start staining. And I think so far my wagon wheel looks pretty cool. To stain the wagon wheel, I'm using dark walnuts gel stain, and I'm diluting it a little bit with water because I want it to be absorbed right into the wood of the dowels and the embroidery hoop. I'm using these leaves that came off of a bush from the Dollar Tree, and I'm going to just on the back side of them, paint them with my burnt orange paint. Now this is a honey brown color that comes from Americana, and I think it's just the perfect color to mimic the underside of magnolia leaves. So each of these is going to get one good coat. Once those are dry, I'm going to now paint the front just with some hunter green acrylic paint. I do have a little bit of talc in here to make it more of a chalk paint, so I only need to do one coat. But you can see that with this color on the front and that orange color on the back, they're turning into magnolia leaves. True magnolia leaves have a bit of a shine on the top of them, so I am taking my matte Mod Podge and I'm going to give them a coat, and this is just going to shine them up just a little bit to make them look like they are real magnolia leaves. Now that everything is dry, it's time to assemble the magnolia flowers, the leaves, and some extra little greenery onto the wagon wheel. I think I'm going to be putting it all the way around the side, so that's going to hide the little metal part. And I'm taking the blossoms right off the stems so I can glue them right down to the dowels and to the embroidery hoop. I love these magnolias. I do get these from Michael's, but I always make sure to get them at their 40% off or their coupon price. You can see here the leaves that are sitting on the side, they have a little bit of a shine, so they do look like magnolia leaves. I'm going to continue adding some leaves and some additional other greenery, a few other blossoms, and then this project is complete. So I'm starting with these 2 wreaths that were in my stash from the Dollar Tree. The one on the left is a full wreath. The one on the right was one that I had already stolen some branches out of. So I'm just going to take this wreath apart and I'm going to add some of those branches to make it look more like a twig wreath. I'm going to use hot glue to attach the broken sticks onto the wreath, and as I go, I found that using smaller pieces that maybe weren't quite so curved looked better, so I started to break some of the pieces into probably about 4 or 5 inch pieces and then had them sticking out a little bit further. It just made it look better. Here's a look at my inspiration. I am using my Boxwood stems and I'm doing some fairly long branches, and then I'll also do some shorter branches. And again, I'm going to use hot glue to secure everything in place. Now I'm going to fill it in with some single stems, and I'm going to make some of them longer and some of them shorter. I've got two sizes of artificial eggs. Some are styrofoam, the smaller ones, and the other ones are larger plastic. I decided to use the styrofoam because paint goes on much nicer on the styrofoam eggs than on the plastic. Ahead of time, I had taken this extra piece of cardboard and some toothpicks and gotten them ready so I could easily just push the styrofoam eggs onto the toothpicks so they have somewhere to dry once they're done painted, and also so it would be easier for me to hang onto them. I'm using 3 different colors to paint the eggs. One is cream, one is warm white, and one is sage. With the sage, I'm actually going to use the warm white together and mix a lighter color because I love this shade of green, but this is just a little too dark. With all the eggs painted, 2 coats and now dry, I'm going to use some black acrylic paint and a really rough brush to add some speckles to the eggs. It's a little hard to see the technique that I'm using for speckling these eggs. I have tried a couple of different ways and I found that this works the best. So what I'm doing is just loading paint onto the brush and then using my finger as a guide. I'm literally just flicking the paint off of my finger. I am just going to randomly glue them with my Weld Bond permanent glue and my hot glue because I don't want any of these eggs to fall off. Hot glue and styrofoam don't mix very well, so I'm just going to be adding a little bit of my Weld Bond permanent glue to help it stick better.
Once I had all the eggs placed where I thought they looked good, some on top and some underneath, some towards the side, facing different directions, this is how it turned out.
With spring and summer fast approaching, I thought it would be really nice to make a wreath that you could display all through the spring and summer season, right into the fall. I've got some of these sunflowers. They're really big. I picked them up at Dollarama, but I think they were a clearance item from a different store because I've never seen any of them since, and they're such high quality blooms. I'm going to remove the stems because I want to just use that little knob that's left and just put some hot glue on it and wedge it right in between the grapevine branches. So this wreath did some evolving as I was working with it. I did put the 3rd blossom down at the bottom there, but later on I'm going to be pulling that off and rejigging it. I'm going to be using some of these ficus leaves. I'm going to glue them in all around the blossoms and then going up the one side and then around the other side. I did also trim some of the ficus leaves down because a couple of them were actually quite a few of them were kind of sticking out in a funny way and I just didn't like the look of it. So when you're working with florals like this, don't be afraid to just move things around or trim different branches off and place them in a different area. You want to make sure that you love it. If you don't love it, you're not going to hang it. Once I was done adding the ficus leaves, I felt that it was too flat. Ficus leaves aren't my very favorite to work with, but I had already put them on there, so I just decided to keep going. I'm going to add some of these other little greeneries that are really more textured and they have a little bit of white on their tips, and I think that made a huge difference. Then, once I had those first couple of stems stuck in, I didn't like that they were so bulky. So I removed the individual stems and I'm just going to hot glue them in places all the way around. And that just gives it more of a delicate texture.
I hope you liked what you saw today. If you did, please give me a thumbs up. That gets me noticed more on YouTube and helps my channel grow. If you're new, make sure you hit that red subscribe button and don't forget about that notification bell. You don't want to miss out on anything else I have to share. Bye for now.